So we're live, just waiting on attendees. We've got a few people coming in. So welcome to this session of FutureScape Virtual. My name is Lewis Normand. I'm sales manager at Bernard's Nurseries, which is a family-owned nursery in Rugby in Warwickshire. I write a monthly piece in Pro Landscaper and occasionally in some retail gardening magazines as well. Huge plant fan and a huge fan of the industry in general. I've worked in a number of different positions across the industry, and I know these gentlemen that we're going to be speaking to today well for the quality of their work. We've not got a good panel for you today. We've got a great panel. Legends, in fact. Absolute legends within the industry. And we're going to be discussing commercial planting and maintenance. I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, where they're going to tell you their name, a bit about their company, the services they offer, and the kind of thing that they're interested in terms of the marketplace. And then we'll get down to some questions. As we're going through, please feel free to use the chat section to ask any questions, and we will respond to them in the latter sort of quarter of the session. So if I can ask Ken, please, to introduce himself, and then we can get started.
Okay, hopefully we're unmuted. So yeah, my name is Ken White. I am the Managing Director of Frost Landscapes. We carry out predominantly commercial landscaping projects to blue chip companies, and the vast majority of those have been within the City of London. We worked on such iconic projects as the Queen Elizabeth Park, Jubilee Gardens, Magic Gardens at Hampton Court. First and foremost, I'm a plant lover, trained at the Royal Botanic Gardens Edinburgh and Royal Botanic Garden Kew. And probably one of the main focuses, not probably, one of the main focuses of our business has been roof gardens. And that's a sector that we see will grow for some while, but the bottom may drop out of it shortly with what's going on with COVID. And we really will carry out, I was going to say any size job, but you know, no job quite too small, no job too large. And we do an awful lot of large tree planting within inside our services, as well as standardized hard and soft landscaping projects.
Thank you, Ken. Vince, over to you.
Good afternoon, all. Vince Edwards from Coles Nurseries, family-run business, well in excess of 100 years trading, and we're a wholesale supplier into the amenity markets. So our key markets are housing, landscape market, local authorities, smaller independent landscapers, but increasingly over the last few weeks and last months of an increase into nursery business. 12 years ago, 13 years ago when I started, that was probably our biggest sector. So we're supplying trees, shrubs, herbaceous, all under the national plan specification via our direct customer base or via the increasingly difficult portal access through local authorities.
Thank you. And finally, Nick.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nick Coslett. I'm now retired, but I did 20 years in the wholesale nursery businesses at Cobblens and the last 15 or so in Palmstead. Like Vince, Palmstead and Cobblens were suppliers into wholesale, into landscapers predominantly, and over the last 10 years, especially since 2008, more and more garden designers. And it's interesting, Vince, saying that the trade is picking up between nurseries, because that's what it used to be like 20 years ago. And now with European things becoming more difficult, we've got a shop in our backyard, and that's a good thing. Been involved with barley. I'm a trustee of the Barley Chalk Fund. And sometimes I think I'm the grumpy old man to landscape. But anyway, that's another thing.
It's not just you that thinks that, Nick. We all think.
Okay.
So if we can start with our first question then, which is, I want each of you, but I'll start with Nick, I want each of you to kind of outline where you think the industry is at at present suggest where plant suppliers, landscape contractors and aftercare professionals' biggest problems and also their opportunities lie currently and where you see them lying in the near future, hopefully post-COVID. So Nick, if we can start with you, please.
Thank you. We live in a world where everyone knows the price of everything, but not the value. And our landscape industry is in the same boat as that. Some sectors are a bit more insulated than others, but the commercial role is in a bad place. I'm wondering if Grenfell will finally be the death knell of value engineering. I would hope that's one of the good things that comes out of it. But overall, I think our public and customer perception base, they don't really widely realize that we bring such a benefit and all the positives that we bring to them. It may be one of the positive outcomes of COVID that they've learned to appreciate access to green space, access to gardens. You're seeing migration of people out of London and cities to wanting to live in the rural areas. And we've got to use every opportunity to reinforce that benefit of being near green space and being in green space regularly. We've got a problem because the growers in the UK, good that they are, they don't meet the UK demand for landscape work. And so we are dependent upon growers across Europe to provide things. We've got used to, just being able to sort of click your fingers and get those products in very quickly. After beginning of January, that will all change. It'll take a lot more time, be more complex, and will cost more. And that's probably a good thing for the horticultural industry. Some prices have been static for my career in wholesale nurseries. Lanisra pileata, for one example, and it hasn't moved at all. So, the profit margins are too slim in horticulture, and they don't allow for reinvestment in infrastructure or people or training enough. And so nurseries growing in the UK need to up their prices a bit more and the value being realised, because the quality's there in most places.
Do you feel that the nurseries can do that successfully? Will it be responded to by the market?
I think if they're having to benchmark against some European prices, then it'll go up. It's about supply and demand, and there are already this year apparently shortages in supply, so that market forces will push the prices up on that. When I was at Palmstead, we only said quotes lasted 30 days. We tended to honour them after up to about a year, but I can see that as getting that tolerance getting thinner and thinner. And one of the issues that the nursery industry has got to face is that designers and sometimes clients as well are seeing the landscapes that are being planted being more and more homogeneous and looking the same, and not giving their designs and their sites that differentiation that they would like. So questions for the nursery industry in the future, I think, is, are we growing the right plants? Are we growing the right plants for the future that they're going to have with regard to climate change? There are lots of interesting things going on around that. Will that do for me now?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
All right.
Vince,
Okay.
I'm going to ask you next, please, the same question. Where are our challenges? Where are our opportunities with plant suppliers like yourself, as well as looking at the contractors and the aftercare professionals that you work with, please?
I think a great opportunity has been sadly missed. I've been at Coles for 13 years. I was talking to James. I've had one meeting where we sat around a table with the house builder, the landscape architect, the landscape contractor, and the nursery. And that was a really useful meeting, because the greater ties that the nursery and the landscape architect can have, and to pick up on Nick's point, is that we can have the right stock within 2 or 3 seasons at the right size. Prunus lusitanica, for instance, when I started, was not a massive seller. We've now increased the production of that line because architects like it. One of our landscapers is winning a lot of work with them. And so we have that as a stock line, not a traded line. So consistency on price, supply, and how quickly we can react to those demands of site agents with very short lead times. Back to the original meeting, the greatest complaint about the whole process was not the plants, not the timing, was the depth of the soil in the planting beds and the quality of the soil in the planting beds. So I think as a business and as an industry, my apologies, as an industry, because we're all slightly fragmented, we never really try and join up enough. Whereas if we can have the right plants, we can have the right stock at the right size. 5 litre, for instance, again, is another line that we have increased in by the tens of thousands because we have a market for it. We can't speculate because it's too costly. So again, communication, working joined up, good strong relationships between landscape architect practices, landscapers and the nurseries will help us fill our beds with products that we know we can sell.
Brilliant, thank you. Ken, you mentioned in your bio that roof gardens may die a death as a result of COVID. If it's a larger part of your business, obviously, where does that take you, and where do you feel the industry is positioned at the moment and headed?
Yeah, I'm not sure it'll necessarily die a death, but I think some of the other people have mentioned earlier, there is a slowdown in the marketplace to an extent. And I can't remember the talk, it may have been Rick from Willoughby's earlier. We do the same, we look at the crane count, and the crane count in London is certainly down, and I think there will be some change of use of space. But as said previously, I think the space is a premium in London, and a lot of the roof gardens in London, for my mind, and the green roofs are there predominantly to control water runoff under whatever guise that they're sold at, because so much of London is subterranean, and we've got to do something to retain the water into these Victorian sewers. So I think it still has a long way to go yet, and I think we will still see a lot more greening. Now, whether that will be traditional green roofs, intensive or extensive, or whether there'll be blue roofs, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Overall, I think there's a shift in the marketplace towards sustainability, which is encouraging to see. There's obviously a lot of infrastructure projects coming on, and the government intends to try to build its way out of the recession caused by COVID. So I think there are opportunities there. I would like to see a lot more emphasis put on SUDs inside developments, and whether those are SUD systems. SUDs doesn't sound very sexy, does it? So the sexy term for it is the kind of rain garden type approach into new housing developments where we don't have this concrete paving and then a tiny little grass strip. It'd be lovely to see some of those turn into swales, and there'd be more permeable paving put in place, and retenuation ponds that could potentially clean and clear water. I'd like to see a lot more sort of growth in that marketplace, and certainly something we'll look to focus on a little bit more is upping our knowledge on SUDs and their benefits to the environment. I think, like Nick, I think people have started to appreciate the value of green space through lockdown, and that can only be positive. And it's quite how do we capitalize and monetize that awareness. That's going to be one of the challenges, I think, for the industry. And then look, when we look down onto the plants, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, I agree with Nick. There quite often you see a very similar plant palette wherever you go, and I understand that it's there because it works, or it's salt tolerant, or whatever the particular reason might be. We're starting to see a few plants appearing on lists that perhaps don't belong on lists. You know, American type plants are starting to appear on lists, and I think some of that is down to the skill set of either designers or architects that are putting these schemes together. We always used to joke, I've been in the game a long time, but you always used to joke that basically people would go into the back of the Hilliers manual and find out, you know, trees and shrubs for damp situations, and literally it was almost alphabetically copied out of the back of the book. There is a lot more awareness there, definitely, and I think we are seeing some fantastic spaces. I mean, I was fortunate to carry out as a company a small project which was planted by Tom Stewart Smith, who did the design, Cannon Street in London, and you know, there's some outstanding plant knowledge there. The project just looks phenomenal, and it's filled in. It looks really well. It looks bright. It's the right plant in the right place. And it does very well. So I think it's like there is varying skills in landscapers, there's varying skills and knowledge in the contractors, and it's up to us all to work together a little bit more collaboratively, the landscaper, the contractor, and the architect, because at the end of the day, the architect has some very good schemes, but we may have planted 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 of this species, and we have a level of knowledge to know where that particular species works. So I think a more collaborative approach, I think, will benefit the industry on the whole. And that's probably enough said at this point in time.
If we can circle back to SUDS there, I think it's an interesting point. Obviously, the new build is the focus for all improved environmental credentials, you know, through law. Is there a way the government, do you think, could incentivize it on people who are not doing new build, but, you know, refurbishing gardens, rebuilding, redoing paving, so as to maybe not make a legal implication, but or possibly even make it legal, but to incentivize people to do it as they used to with solar panels and things like that, to reduce impact on the national grid?
Yeah, I guess that there is ways of them doing that. You know, you could encourage forms of rain harvesting or water harvesting inside of gardens. Maybe they're doing that by encouraging us all to put water meters in and to be a little bit more responsible with the use of water. I don't have a definitive answer as to how they could particularly do that, but I'm certain that there would be or should be ways of which we could be incentivized to do that, indeed.
Gents, do you have anything to add to that?
I think if you look at any modern high street or any modern housing development now, people tend to want off-road parking and bang goes the front lawn. Oh, excuse me, that's my auto.
You've not moved, yeah.
Auto light's just gone up. Power saving lights, you see, water meters.
Yeah, well, that's good, exactly. Case in point.
So people will tarmac over that traditional front garden with the hedge, the central border, the roses, that traditional garden. You can still have modern, interesting front gardens, but people want their cars safe off the road, more than one vehicle per family, often 2 and 3 cars per growing young family. And as I understand, there is no law that says you can't do that. But again, as Ken said, perhaps incentives need to be added, because that water's got to go somewhere that used to soak into the grass, under the hedge line, into those borders, and it goes into the runoff system. So until there's some enforcement, I don't see them being a happy ending to that sort of scenario.
Nick, do you have anything to add?
I think I don't think there's even law for new build at the moment to follow SUDS. It's not in statute.
Okay.
And okay, the current housing stock is a much larger thing, but you know, if they want to build a few 100,000 houses a year, this government, it could be an easy change to building regulations that they have SUDS, they have grey water systems, they use solar power where possible, and you know, these things are technically possible. We know as a landscape industry that they're things that we can do. Yeah. But they seem to be very slow to change building regs and put it in. And the Landscape Institute were pushing for SUDS legislation years ago, and it's still, you know, it's still on the back burner. We're very non-politically active as an industry, even though we're nearly £25 billion a year as a turnover as a whole landscape horticulture business industry. You know, we're very quiet and sitting in the corner at the back there. Hopefully we all vote, but we need to be more politically active and push our elected members to just understand the size and the benefit of this industry.
Well, one thing I've been banging on about, and I will say banging on it because it is something that I've been quite happily moaning about, is the absence of a minister for horticulture, just entirely dedicated to horticulture. As you say, 25 billion, that's quite a contribution in terms of what we put into the UK, not just in terms of aesthetics, but in terms of value of lifestyle. And for me, it seems just ridiculous that we don't have someone totally dedicated to that part of the industry, so that, as you're right, we find it difficult to engage actively with legislation and with Parliament, and possibly that's because we don't have a really very focused advocate who doesn't have to worry about agriculture and fisheries as well. What do you feel on that?
I think it's because it's a business. We're so fractured. We're amenities, there are retail, there are garden centres, there are paving companies, there are underground wire guying companies, landscape architects, landscape contractors. We have so many little groups and our own associations that we forget the powerful voice we could have if we were joined up with a minister. And I still think we are regarded as businesses, albeit big businesses, but not an industry as the whole. You know, we are owned by James Coles and individuals that invest in businesses through many generations, but we're not PLCs, we're not regarded as blue chip, and perhaps we don't get the credibility that as an industry whole we should do. But that's where, to take up on your point, an advocate at ministerial level would drive the industry rather than the individual sectors.
Okay. Nick, anything to add? You're on silent, but okay, I take that was a no. Ken?
I agree with the points, but I think there is some joined up thinking. You know, I think the associations are doing good moves. You know, the Horticultural Trades Association and all of its bodies beneath it, Barley, the Horticultural Round Table. You know, the fact that garden centres are open as this time round during lockdown as essential retail just shows you what the trade associations can achieve. I think there is a voice in Parliament, and perhaps the associations maybe don't do such a good job of getting out there the message to what they actually do outside and what they do, how much lobbying they do, whether it's Barley or the HTA. And I'm going to back HTA. I sit as a non-exec director with the HTA, and I think often we perhaps don't get our communication message out as well as to how much work we are doing behind the scenes. So I don't think it's quite as hopeless as it might have been made to sound. I think there's definitely a lot more that could be done and should be done, but I think we shouldn't forget how much work all of those associations, Barley, APL, Horticultural Trades, GEMA, all of these sorts of things are collectively achieving. And the Horticultural Roundtable has certainly been a very, very good. And to get a voice in Parliament and advocates in Parliament has helped. But look, no doubt there could be more, and there is more to be done. But I think it's it is disjointed, but not maybe as disjointed as what people might believe, in my opinion.
No, I think you're definitely right there. Go on, Nick.
So what you're saying, Cats, what you're saying, Ken, is that it used to be like herding cats, and now it's a bit less so, is it?
Yeah, herding cats would be a good description of lots of elements of the industry at different times. I agree with what you're saying, Ken, that there's a lot of people, there are a lot of bodies perhaps working together, often working singularly, but they're all working on a similar cause and engaging with Parliament. I think that definitely does make quite a big difference, and your good example of the garden centres being open during this lockdown is a really important case in point. I don't think there's any doubt that they're doing it. You and I have both been at a round table thing before, where we were lobbying in Parliament, and it makes a difference. I just always feel that a single voice, focusing that at Parliament, actually in the chambers, would make a big difference going forward. But definitely lobbyists are a big part of the industry that really we don't hear enough about, and the achievements are not widely sung. So yeah, I think it's something that we probably just need to shout a bit more about later on. Okay, back to you, Ken. I'm going to ask another question. As someone who's running a business who supplies, installs, and has historically you've maintained projects as well, do you feel, and we've discussed it in part, but do you feel that there's a big disconnect between those the suppliers who supply you, you as the installer, and people who go on to then aftercare plant projects? Do you feel that there's a way that we could be working better together? At what point should we all be engaging on a project?
Yeah, I can't talk for everybody because we're all in different marketplaces, even within inside the commercial world in itself. So I'm fortunate to work with some very good landscape architects and some work for some very good clients or developers that really do get the value of what is undertaken. I do feel sometimes that the landscape contractors' experience should be a little bit more taken into consideration, but that's less so now than what it used to be. And I'm going to say back in the day, as the kids say, back in the day. Because we do plant an awful lot of these plants, and we have learned an awful lot of lessons on what will work well and what doesn't work well. So yeah, in my marketplace, I think it's quite well connected. But I do, as I say, we do sometimes see projects where we think, that's kind of fad that's kind of coming in. There's lots of good fads that are in the sort of Rudolph type gardens and things, but all of a sudden we're finding strange plants that we wouldn't normally sort of encounter. We like it very much where we've got enough foresight on the plant to be able, the planting scheme, to be able to go to the nurseries to have it contract grown, because sometimes the plants that the architects are looking for are not available in the numbers that they're seeking. 1 or 2 of something is something, but 30,000 of a particular species is a completely different kettle of fish. So contract growing, I think, is good for everybody. That the architect, the end client, gets what they're looking for. The nurseries get their forward order book. They get to understand what they're looking for in production, and we get the opportunity to be involved and do inspections regularly throughout the process to make sure things are developing along as we would expect. So I think so. Depends where you sit in the not so much in the chain, but what your clients and everything are. I think people have a variety of different experiences, but I think we've worked pretty well with nurseries over the years.
Is that because you've forged those relationships, or because you've done so much work that you've built them, or is it just
A bit of both, a bit of both. We definitely have, nurseries that you feel or believe are good at doing one particular thing, or different groups of lines. Often things are driven by price, but we try to make sure that the price isn't driven too low, that everybody needs to get something out of this. Everybody throughout the supply chain needs to be paid fair and equally. So it is an element of relationships with existing nurseries. But then if we do see a different plant palette, it's about engaging with them early on to make sure that the requirements and the specifications are being met. And the great nursery debate, which was on yesterday, I think it was, wasn't it? I think there were some very interesting points raised there about the European nurseries perhaps selling things in different size pots to what they might do in the UK, so making it less capable to compare apples with apples. Quite clearly on that debate, actually, it was quite fascinating. That there's an awful lot of shortage coming our way, and problems with Brexit, which I'm sure won't be the only time it's mentioned during this. But yeah, so
I suppose the longer lead times and the better working relationships that you've got, particularly with nurseries, essentially means that greater the success is likely to be. Ignoring Brexit and ignoring any other factors which are going to slow us down, you know, really it's a matter of how prepared everyone is, and then the relationship you have with the architects in order to say this isn't achievable in your time frame, or you know, whether you can be honest with them and get good results.
yeah, it's about managing. It's about managing expectation, isn't it? And that's it. And sometimes saying, you know, in the past couple of projects that's not done so well. And biosecurity and pests, you know, moving around in different plants. You know, sometimes you'll see species that are on there that you know are prone to vine weevil or something, and you look to try and get those changed and to work with the nurseries to find alternatives that will still give the same aesthetics that the architect is looking at. And yeah, I've probably said enough. The nursery guys know far more about this than me.
Vince, what's your feeling on this then? Where are we experiencing disconnect, and what can we do to improve it?
I suppose the point Ken raised, which was very good, is the time to supply and time to grow to the particular size or pot volume that the scheme wants. I'm sure when a housing development's passed and the work begins, somebody orders a shed load of bricks. They don't forget to order the bricks until the bricklayers arrive on Monday morning. They're pre-booked well in advance, and everything comes in seamlessly, and it follows a program until we get to ordering the plants. The drawings have probably been agreed months, years in advance of the scheme, for some planning issues and some for some design issues. But we're never told, nor is the landscaper. He may well have had the inquiry to price. He sends it off to the nursery, who will price based on availability at the time and some projected time frame. But then he all goes quiet until that call on a Wednesday morning. Can we have plots 1 to 48? Monday it's 7 o'clock in wherever. And we need those herbaceous in a 3 litre because the architect wants a 3. Well, I've only got my 2s because that's a standard size, not a 1.5 that those strange sized pots that Ken was talking about from imported lines. We need that time. So treat us again like an industry in this whole supply chain, part of the process from the beginning, and then we cannot scale and have things contract grow. Nurserymen like nothing more than have a contract grow for 100,000 plants because there's no speculation.
Yeah.
At the minute, Coles beds, and I'm sure when Nick was at Armstead, the bulk of it is speculation. Yeah, it's projected based on previous year's sales. If something goes wrong with a line, Fraxinus Excelsior, those projections are dead in the water. So let's all join up again. Helps back to this previous question. That's where we can improve the business and get the actual design that the architects want in the size, in the time frame they need, and the nurseries can react.
So I'm going to say CPD to you, because I know that was something that you were very involved with before. I presume you still are, in terms of developing programs for. Is that to say CPD behind you? Yeah,
absolutely.
There we go. You're well. Thank you for positioning that side there. So presumably this has got to be one of the big ways of bringing people together.
Yeah, again, the CPD is a fantastic way to get your message and your knowledge. So Frost sought to have a CPD in terms of the time process of commissioning the design, getting the landscaper to price it via the nursery, and having those plants ready. Plants are seasonally available. They're at their best at a particular time. One of the criticisms many years ago was that when the finance director from a developer came out in the winter, everything was bare because it was all deciduous stock. There was very little interest to see them, but they look great in the spring. That we sell houses 12 months of the year nowadays. Do we need 4 pallets depending on when the job is planting? So that there's a continuation of flower and an impact on all of the schemes all of the time.
Brilliant, thank you. Nick, what do you have to add to that?
I think Vince has done some very good CPD things, not just with the National Plant Spec, but also he's he had his tree days and teaching people, designers and specifiers, the process of growing trees, which is a sort of 7 or 10 year process. And at Palmstead, and also later, also a long time ago at Cobblins, I was running the soft landscape workshops, which was about getting people to engage together across sectors, and they were always good at building that network and those communication things. But if you the landscape architects have been asking to be on the table around with the civil engineers and the architects for years, and they're still struggling to get on that table early, and they suffer from only being in the process, the project process, to get planning permission, and then they're ousted because they think that the client or the project manager thinks that he knows better, can do it cheaper or whatever. And ever since then, the impact of how the landscape works, and including the plants, gets diluted. And I mean, when I was at Palmstead, I think when we were growing for the Olympic Park, maybe about 5% of our production was contract grown. The vast bulk was grown based on a history of the sort of orders we'd had in the past and what people were liking, a bit of trends as well in that, in fashion. And so they were growing, 1 million plants a year on a speculative basis. And I'm sure, Vince, you were in a similar position. And, because of the accumulated data and knowledge, those decisions were reasonably good and the wastage was fairly low. It allowed a sort of profit margin for the business. But no, nurseries contract growers are also great, but so many projects, and Ken will, I'm sure, confirm this, the construction period overruns. So landscaping, which is tail end Charlie, so to speak, gets pushed back to another season or whatever. And the plants then need to be cared for and fostered. And that often means potting it up again and charging more for the plant. And construction people, that's sort of not, they don't like that. It's beyond their comprehension. They've spent the money in the concrete in the ground earlier. Sorry, moaning again.
No, that's fine. We produce quite a lot of plants under contract, with a mixture being some of them for commercial projects, but a lot of them for show gardens each year. Obviously, this year has been a disaster when it comes to show garden plant production, and we're hoping that next year will be much better. But we did find that there was quite a lot of works that people were looking to get through before Brexit hits. So we picked up quite a bit of larger scale commercial supply to projects like RHS Wisley and RHS Bridgewater in particular, which was great. The idea of contract production is, some nurseries, that's all they do, but a lot of production is speculative, as we've said. Obviously, Fraxinus excelsior was given as a risk, and we've got ash dieback as a consequence, which has prohibited sales since 2012 until we're kind of moving out of it, hopefully. And these are issues that are a big potential cost to a lot of nurseries, where they end up with a lot of stock that they can only burn. Where do we feel that phytosanitary changes are going to influence us going forward? Vince, what do you think?
I suppose we spoke earlier about the UK industry not being sufficiently large enough to supply the market within the UK. And Ken hinted at plants that have inherent issues. So I suppose we're talking about host plants now, and Panellists and things like that. So let's look at lavender. We don't even scratch the surface in terms of the demand for lavender in the UK. We don't grow lavender under glass because we do not get the return of putting it under glass because of the price it can be shipped in from Holland and other markets. That may well change if the price point of lavender in the UK under glass rises. That will depend on the demand. But again, back to, again, Ken mentioned it, value engineering. Will that plant get lost off the pallet just because it becomes too much of a price point? A, because it's only available in the UK at the moment, or B, because there's just not the supply around. We worry about plants coming in under the radar. You know, we're thick into this. Which nursery is going to be a pod? Who's our customs agent? How are we going to change the labels in January? Take the Euro flag off. That all seems very important. And the latest link to the DEFRA site was around yesterday. It's those unlicensed plants that will still come into the UK that causes a major threat. So we're very, very nervous about that aspect of the controls. We will be controlled because we're a large business. Ken's organisation, Nick's previous employer, would have been the same. But will smaller organisations afford to name their pods, have a customs agent, pay the extra costs and import licences and duties? I don't know the answer to that, but only takes one bad palm and my apologies, one bad olive. And I'm not going to name names, but you can still buy very large olives at extremely cheap prices in some of the larger businesses that sell a lot of electrical goods and food goods and plant goods.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Johnsons of Wixley said that they were anticipating an additional cost of something like £550,000 a year managing imports with tariffs and customs agents fees. Obviously, that's quite a big impact. It might bring us round to Ken. Do you currently import plants directly, or do you buy from UK nurseries principally?
Trees are obviously the one that tends to get bought more, and larger specimen shrubs tend to get more bought direct from European, Dutch, German, Italian.
Do you think that's likely to continue?
I think it's going to have to. I think we don't have enough stock in the UK to be able to fill it. I can't remember. Somebody said if all the UK trees that are planted in the UK, the British tree nurseries would run out inside a year. Whether that's an exaggeration or a truth, I'm not sure, but I think it does. I think that is definitely true. The phytosanitary stuff is obviously huge going forward, and Xylella, because of its host species, is a massive risk. And God forbid we should get some of come into the UK and we get these 5 kilometre, 10 kilometre, I'm not sure what the current standing is, lockdown zones. It would devastate our industry. So it is something that needs to be taken very seriously. And I think it's going to be interesting going forward with how it carries on. And I'm going to go back to the debate the other day, the great plant debate the other day, when somebody mentioned the sort of quality of the plant inspectors that were getting taken on, and did they have the knowledge and the experience to be able to manage it correctly. I think it's going to be a huge challenge. I hope that the UK nursery industry, right across the spectrum of plants that it grows, does benefit from changes in legislation and Brexit, and it's not all downturn, but I think it's going to take quite some time.
Yeah, I think that time is the real issue here, isn't it? That we've got the potential to do it, and it actually is an opportunity particularly for UK nurseries. But time is a real issue, and how quickly we can respond to the needs of change. So we are definitely going to be dependent upon Europe and European supply for quite a while. And working closely with our plant health inspectorate is crucial to avoid not just killing your own nursery's business, but most nurseries are crowded near one another. So a 5 kilometre exclusion zone can really harm your neighbouring nurseries if you're in certain parts of the UK where there's a high density. Nick, what do you have to add to that?
Well, there is something just starting which will help to for UK nurseries to offer a better sense of security for customers. and people like Ken, and this is the Plant Health Nursery Certification Scheme. Now, if you want to know a bit more about it, you have to read my article in December's edition, but for a landscaper. But the risks of biosecurity caused Prince Charles to have a meeting at Highgrove a couple of years ago, and a number of people went there. And this was where the concept of having quarantine sites on nurseries, so that, Ken, if you were buying in from Europe for your large specimens and trees, you might buy them in a year in advance and hold them in a quarantine area to guarantee to your customer that they were fully healthy and risk-free. And that's what nurseries want to provide to their customers, that the plants that they supply are risk-free. So we do need good controls at the border. And I think the phytosanitary controls that we're going to see are going to increase prices by the best part of 20%. But there is a nursery, plant health nursery standard that has been set, and it's been largely sponsored by DEFRA, but the HTA are involved as well, and a number of other organisations. We've only got 4 or 5 nurseries clicked into it at the moment and have been audited and got certification. But if you go on the Plant Healthy website, you can do your own self-assessment, and I'm sure Vince has done his. And that it says, well, you're a bit short in this area. You need to concentrate on that, and it will evolve that you will have a plant health specialist in each nursery, checking the plants and checking the goods in, so that the goods going out are risk-free. But this, like the nursery certification scheme and the national plant specification, if everybody's asking for this standard across the board, then it'll work. But if it only happens in a few little nurseries who feel that they're doing the right thing, the marketplace won't be big enough, and there'll be people diving under with substandard goods and substandard quality. So, and UK nurseries don't, and there was a survey done, and that they're saying that they wouldn't sign up until, you know, some horrific element of a nursery going out of business because they got Xylella or whatever, frighten them into doing it. It's designed to fit nurseries of all different sizes and different scales, to provide an externally audited certification scheme saying that the standards that the nursery are following are the best practical.
And let's face it, contractors and landscape architects could end up putting this in part of their spec, that they're only going to accept nurseries that are certified. So it can, you know, work from top down, rather than from everyone just looking to be compliant or looking to be, you know, sort of morally conscious at the very least. Yeah, hopefully we'll see more in the way of people reaching for means to say, I'm doing it right. You know, I'm doing it clean, and we're looking after our plants. The quality is good. We're quarantining where necessary, and we're maintaining really high standards across the board, which I think a lot of UK nurseries are. The great majority are. But it would be good to see some kind of guarantees upon those. I've noticed in the last year or so, much more in the way of designer lists coming in with must be UK grown next to things like lavenders and rosemaries. And I think that ignoring RHS shows, where obviously that's a necessity, I think that's a positive start for people making choices which really secure their work against the name and the quality of the nursery supplying them. Let's double back to a question that we kind of roughly brought up previously, which was one of the criticisms of larger commercial plantings has been traditionally that they can be quite unadventurous. There are some very good examples in UK projects in recent years, which that's not true of at all. And the Olympic Park would be a good example of one where there was a wide range of plants used. Broader palette selections of plants can be an advantage. Ken, you've also expressed that there can be disadvantages within it. I'd just like to know what the panel feels in terms of, do we often play it too safe, or are we becoming more adventurous? Where are we headed? Vince, if I can start with you, please.
Okay. I'm 57 years of age and sort of started at Brooksby College when I was 17. And imagine the idents I did in those dark and distant days, pretty much like the catalogue that we produce now. There's a lot of reasons for that, and Ken hinted that they're safe, they're tried and tested, and they deliver. And at all stages along the process, from the architect, designer, installer, nursery, client, we all have a duty of responsibility to ensure that we deliver something that has a value and will last. There are trends, even in my lifetime of horticulture. But again, I think the UK climate, if we think of how cold we can be and how mild some winters can be and how wet some springs and how very, very hot some summers, is a unique situation for the plant palettes that we use and what nurseries grow. I'm gonna pick one out, Hebe Heartbreaker, a particularly nice, attractive looking Hebe, predominantly retail based in its early life, starting to trickle down, and we start to see it on drawings, start to see it being specified. We all know we can trade on it, and you bring more and more in, and then you sit in that production meeting with the sales team and the production director, and you say, blimey, we've shipped a lot of Hebe Heartbreaker in this last year. Do you think we should put some into production? So you look at the numbers, and if it's a fairly new variety, you've got those additional costs for the early stock because of the breeder's rights. But it's not been tried and tested in our swings of extreme, and it can often become an annual, and that's a costly exercise for the nursery. The client's dissatisfied. The nursery have gone full steam into production and stock dies on the beds, or we have some bad hits for large schemes. The architect loses faith in it, the customer loses faith in it, and the nursery's stuck with a production cycle, probably running 2 or 3 seasons, that has not got a market. So, you know, as a grower, and I class myself as a grower because that's the sector of the business I work in, we only grow products that Nick, if he's a designer, is going to be using, and Ken as a landscaper will be installing. And all 3 of us in that chain need confidence, because without that confidence, the client's not going to come back to us. So yes, it is a fairly stale, static palette, but I think there are reasons for that. And not all of them are very easy to answer or find a scenario for.
Okay, just quickly, do you think that the nurseries are driving the plant selection then, or is it being driven? Is your plant production being driven by what people are requesting?
Nurseries don't drive plant palettes because we don't like plants having too many holidays on the nursery. We like them through the system. We like a cycle of production. Cutting, pot on, 2, 3, 5, 7, 10, gone, back through that cycle again. Holidays for Lanisra are not too good for us. That's when they become 95p. Well, they've been 95p for a long time and a bit in big numbers. So no, we react. That's why Coles is now doing in excess of 250,000 5 litres. It's because practices said, don't cross the 5 and send me a 3. I want a 5 because I want that look. If you grow 5s, we will buy them. I sounded like Kevin Coslett then. If you build it, they will come. If you grow them, we will buy them off you. So we react.
Okay, Ken, what's your take on this?
So if we go back to the first bit, yes, I mean there are plants that are definitely chosen and for the specifics, aren't they? You know, salt torrent at the side of the road, you know, and it depends where the project is. You know, commercial projects are not all sexy, glamorous projects. You know, some of them are around housing estates, roadside, so they serve a purpose. They keep people out, they attract people. You know, they're thorny, they're whatever you're looking to do. They're good at screening. So the build environment obviously has a lot to do with the plant choices, and maybe there is a level of cart and horse here and kind of get stuck in a bit of a loop, because If the architects, if the nurseries are growing based on speculation, based on past year's sales, then the architects know what's available in the nurseries, and therefore it kind of goes round in circles a little bit. So I take Vince's point that he doesn't want the stuff on the nursery for a long time, but I think both gentlemen have both said that a lot of stuff is grown on past year's sales and what the projects are. So we are a little bit stuck in a loop there, and it is down to the type of project. We are seeing some very nice planting projects, and some of the not so nice planting projects are because of the environment that they're in, and they're there to do a specific purpose, and they're tried and tested. So yeah. Do I have anything else to say to that?
Where have you seen the envelope pushed? Where have you seen really good example of planting that was atypical rather than what we see so often?
I mean, I think, the one I mentioned earlier, the small pocket park in London, some of the roof gardens that are going on there. There are, I know it's a controversial project to mention, and it didn't go ahead, but the garden bridge and the planting that Dan Pearson had on there, I wanted to walk on that bridge. I wanted to plant a tree on that bridge. I remember talking to John at Willoughby's and saying, if you guys win this, will you let me plant a tree on there? Because I want to be able to tell my kids I did it. But there were some interesting planting. Then it goes maybe counterproductive what I was saying about some of the American stuff, because there was a lot of kind of prairies and things. But the envelope is getting pushed in some places. But I think it can only get pushed according to what the end use of the amenity is. What's it being planted for? Is an open space, a play park, a housing estate, a development, leisure area. So some of it is kind of limited around there. But
yeah.
Lewis, there are other factors that impact on the plant palette. We were involved with a project not too far away locally, education in a very nice market town. And the building and drive was around Briam. Part of the Briam points was the native planting. So the scenario being, we have the main entrance to an educational building, public footpath, main thoroughfare for a very nice little market town. At the back of the screened area was an open area cafeteria right by the main entrance to the building. The specification was Crataegus monogyna, Prunus spinosa, Chloris avellana, Ilex aquifolium as the hedge.
Yeah.
How do we change? We want to fulfill the Briam, but that limits what we can put in that area.
Oh, next chip. And yeah, I mean, it's an important point. Obviously, designing's got to be focused with the user in mind. But I suppose there you could have changed for other native plants with the same success, but without maiming people or children. Yeah, Nick, what do you have to add to that?
To pick up on Vince's point about native and non-native and Briam, the drive behind that is that the biodiversity and the ecological benefit of the site should be stronger and better after development than before. But sadly, what we see is all the money for landscape going into newt fencing and not much else left over. But going back to Briam, actually the words are native or non-native with a known benefit to wildlife. That's the definition. So if you look at the work that was done in Olympic Park, there was a industrial wasteland there, and they put plants in and flowers in, and they had everything in from ladybirds to peregrine falcons. Build it and they will come. And we know that the biodiversity of urban gardens in a combination give you far greater biodiversity than you get in any of our national nature reserves. So it goes back to right plant, right place. If you're in an urban environment, you know, having your shrub border purely of native shrubs which grow to about 4 meters tall doesn't appeal to the developers. They want actually something evergreen. And what I saw in my time at Palmstead is that the number of evergreen shrubs being asked for increased and the deciduous shrubs decreased. Forsythia was grown in far fewer numbers than when Vince first did his plant IDs in college. That and Chenomely's Napil scars. So Brianne needs to be challenged. The trouble is that the ecologists have slightly the stronger position in the development chain, sometimes above the landscape architects. And I think going back to the other point about where in these new plants and coming from, it's in my experience predominantly from the designers, and these really fantastic plants from like Tom Stewart Smith, Dan Pearson, Nigel Dunnett, and James Hitchmo, and there are others. They've you know the Sheffield School especially have done wonders in looking at plants that will work in the public realm landscapes, and Sheffield is full of suds work and rainfall harvesting and that sort of thing. And yes, at Palmstead we responded to that. So when I first arrived there, we were growing 5% of the production was in perennials. By the time I left, we were 45% perennials. And yes, the trouble is that no one nursery can do enough any testing of the product. So most of them weren't growing Hebe Heartbreaker because it would die after about -3. And there's no longer any of the academic institutions doing plant trials or that sort of thing. So that element has been lost. And so the nurseries are in the hands of the designers saying, I'd like this, can you find it? You know, I had 2 years to grow the plants for the Olympic Park because I had to Google 50% of them to find out what they were. That's really stimulating for the nurseries, especially when there was a market for them. But a number of those plants have been perpetuating and carried on being asked for by customers because some of these real good plantsman designers are trendsetters. You're often seeing the landscape architect do the master plan and then the garden designer coming doing the planting plan because their plant knowledge and planting education has been much better.
It's also worth noting, I think, that obviously Nigel Dunnett and James Hitchmo in Sheffield, as well as people like Dan Pearson and Tom Stewart Smith, they all trial plants themselves. So they're actually actively doing that job of practicing and experimenting to see how successful things are over a period of time in the British climate. And that's something that came up yesterday a few times, that nurseries trialing plants is, it's a really important thing that we need to do, even if it's just sticking 1 or 2 in the ground in the corner of the nursery just to see how successful they are. It may mean that you're a couple of years before you can make informed decisions, but you've got a better position to start marketing large-scale production and supply to people like Ken who are going to be installing it, and then the aftercare.
Trouble is, some nurseries think that that's a plant having a holiday and not.
Only a couple of plants is not so bad. Nick, you're someone who's seen it all in your career, retired relatively recently after many years since, claiming that you were going to retire. You and I we share a neighbouring page on Pro Landscaper, and we've written about quite a few similar issues on the same issue. What do you think we're currently looking at the right issues as an industry? Are we focused on the things we need to be right now? Or are the things on the horizon that are going to be bigger issues for us in the next couple of years in terms of plant supply, in terms of the installation of plants, and also maintenance? Where are we headed, and are we headed the right way?
Well, just to pick up on your last point, maintenance, I feel we're headed toward the American system where everything is mow and blow, as I call it. You know, that everything is trimmed to with a, you know, to, especially in industrial landscapes and things. So the shrubs there can't flower or can't fruit, and you don't get seasonal variation. The other sad thing is that the amount of evergreens being planted means that there is less seasonal variation in certain schemes. But I don't think we're facing the right issues. We have still got a long way to go to educate the entire customer base that biosecurity is really important. Ever since the single market started, you know, plant and pest imports and diseases have increased. The benefit of not getting away from the single market will be lots of other things negative, but one of the positive things is that perhaps we can be tighter on our plant security. But that means it'll take Ken longer to get plants out of Europe because they've got to have a plant phytosanitary certificate. That's got to be communicated through to DEFRA before the plants come into the country. They've got to be inspected at a point of arrival. And not only the duty's got to be paid, the VAT has got to be paid on import, and it's got to be financed by the buyer. So all those pressures are going to put on prices. But no, I don't necessarily know if we're growing the right things, especially with regard to trees, and this comes to Vince and people like Hilliers and other tree growers. If you think of a tree's lifespan as at least 50 years, in usual, are we growing the right clones of trees to survive the climate that we're going to be getting in 50 years' time?
Future-proofing.
Sorry.
Future-proofing.
Absolutely. And there is a guy called Harry Watkins doing his PhD at Sheffield and working on something called fitter flora, whereby the plant choice is linked to where those phenotypes come from, the climate they are experiencing at the moment. Maybe we should be sourcing plants from those microclimates to grow here for our future. And he's looking at combining ecological and botanical research into a list of plants that can be grown in the UK, so that growers can grow them, and that architects and contractors can buy them with clear knowledge that they're going to be working, and they will work in the future. It doesn't matter so much about shrubs and perennials. They're short-lived in general and not likely to be so affected. But our tree stock that we're growing in this country, I would hazard to guess that most growers of trees in this country don't know the provenance or the origin of the plant stock that they're growing. They may know that they got it from Henk Dudar in Holland 10 years ago, but they haven't a clue where Henk got it from, and nor has Henk probably. And if we want to know the right plants that we're growing for our future, or our grandchildren's future, then we've got to get in touch with that thing. And a lot of people don't understand provenance and origin, but if I have a tree in my back garden, I take the acorns off that and I grow it, then I can sell the oak tree as Kent provenance or South of England provenance. But I haven't a clue about the origin, because the Huguenots could have brought that tree in from France when they migrated in the 1700s and planted it in my garden then. So the origin is unknown. And we need to go back.
You say that it grows in the UK.
Yes, but will it cope with the 4 degrees increasing temperature that we're going to get in, I'm in Kent, shrinkable clay soils and everything. Not good for beech, not good for oak, maybe okay for sweet chestnut.
Ken, you're someone who installs gardens and landscapes that are not mow and blow. They are finesse landscapes, generally speaking, and require a lot more in the way of programmed aftercare. They're probably more diverse than a lot of people are supplying in terms of plant range. Do you feel we're looking in the right areas? Are we being thoughtful enough to the future?
It's a massive question, that really, isn't it? It's a massive question. I mean, we're talking about plants and things that will suit the climate in 50 years if we keep getting the temperature changes. I'd like to focus on not getting the temperature changes and the tech and things that need to be done so that we don't end up, because we could end up, if the tech and changes in habit and lifestyle alters, and we do all this planning for a 4 or 5 degree in the future because of man's effect on the environment, we could also be in a problem. So I'd like to first of all deal with it to try and sort of prevent that side of things. But I think we do need to definitely look at you know, if we're not going to, for example, harvest the rainwater, for example, to use for planting and for watering and irrigation systems, which we're seeing more of, then we do need to then look at more drought tolerant sort of species. And I think that it's not a one approach fits all strategy there. You know, there are some types of planting schemes that require huge amounts of water, and they are getting more. So green walls, for example, would be one, wouldn't it? They're getting much more water conscious in some of the schemes. You know, that it's moved on a lot more hydroponics, aeroponics, misoponics and things, but there are systems that use huge amounts of water. So I think in, you know, I don't have a definitive answer. I think in some cases, yes, we are. But on the other hand, I think, you know, for me, it's all about trying to make our practices far more sustainable and environmentally friendly. I'd love to think that planting trees inside a city, for example, was going to solve all of the problems, but it's not. It's going to get solved by tech. Whether that's you know, keeping cars out of cities or electric car power or whatever it's going to be. You know, the plants have a huge part to play, but unfortunately at the moment, human interference is having a far greater impact than what I think planting can correct, although it very definitely has got a part to play. Urban heat island effects and all the bits and pieces. So I think, you know, generally people are trying to keep up with what's going on and look at the shorter long-term future. As Nick says, shrubs are, you know, they're relatively short-lived, aren't they? And it's the trees. And I did write down Harry Watkins there. I shall have to have a look out for his work. But so. Yeah, I think we are trying, but I'd like to see us solve the problems that are causing these issues in the first place. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good point that we, you know, it's easy to say, well, we're going to do this because of that, but if we can avoid that, all the better to not have to do this.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the $1 million question, isn't it? That's the $1 million question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vince. What do you have to add to that, please?
The broader question. Ken said everything I was going to say, so I'll just second what he said on that. To pick up on Nick's provenance, a big part of the health phytosanitary is plant tracking on nurseries. So just to pick up on one point of Nick's, and I think provenance is origin, as you quite rightly said, Nick, is almost impossible. Well, it is impossible, but the provenance is important. And I go back to my early days at Hadlow College, an open space in Maidstone, picking acorns up, taking them back to the college, getting them to analyse chip and stratification and all those wonderful things that nature does was a great exercise. And you understand that you can quite rightly say that acorn you've picked from Maidstone that's its provenance. At Coles, we can give provenance to a lot of our trees, and certainly some of the shrubs, because we have a very vibrant prop unit that's doing 1.5 million cuttings a year. So we will track where we buy. If we buy from Oakover with a UK provenance, county provenance, that will be recorded in our plant tracking. And we may buy that as a seedling tree and go through all those NPS stages until it's a saleable product. So we do have complete faith and knowledge of some of the lines. But again, we do trade like any nursery does, because the UK cannot supply its own business with stock for planting out, for rowing out, let alone landscape projects. So we have to diversify. But that's when we need to know that our trading partners outside of the UK are as diligent and as respectful in terms of the products they're supplying to our market as we are, as we supply to our customers.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask one more quick question before we have a look at some of the questions that have been asked. Feel free to ask any more questions while we're doing this using the chat. So just a short answer from each of you, please. Ken, first of all, Frost, you handle a lot of large range projects. Presumably you bring in some external contractors to do specific jobs. Are there projects that you wouldn't address, that you would prefer to turn down because you don't feel that they are either morally and ethically the right kind of thing that you're involved in, or because you don't believe that you're going to do as good a job as you'd prefer to? And then I'm going to extend that to Nick and Vince in terms of plant production. Are there projects that you would avoid doing because of any kind of issue? Ken?
Okay, so we'll stick with the soft side of things, because obviously on the hard we tend to bring in a lot more subcontractors on the hard side than we do on soft. But I think like any landscape business, we are reliant upon our subcontractors to assist us because of depending on how busy and everything you are. The morally and ethically, I haven't really come across anything in soft landscaping that has worried me to that extent. There are certain things as a business that we've tended to steer away from. Yeah, we used to do quite a bit of green walls, but that's not something that we get involved in really anymore. If we do, we would subcontract that to all risk to one of the specialist companies that do that. There's been some very successful green walls, but there's been some huge failures in green walls. Mm-hmm. And we've had some successes and some huge failures in green walls. So yeah, probably that's the one that I would have a tendency to stay away from. Mm. But that's probably because of people better placed in the marketplace than us to do it, and it's quite a strange concept, green walls, in that sort of it's the whole argument, soil, no soil, pot bound, build-ups of salts, all sorts of things, and it's quite an artificial environment, isn't it, to keep plants in very small containers. So but there are people that are being very successful in that marketplace, and it certainly is a trend that we've seen, but it's not something that we tend to get too involved in. So
brilliant. No, that's worth knowing. Yeah, because it's important to understand where you are comfortable working and where your limitations lie. And a perfect example, living walls, that they're green walls are they're a very different beast to most other forms of planting. Vince, what do you have in terms of plant production?
I suppose a couple of examples, and Nick touched on it. Excuse me, Nick touched on it. It's quoting for jobs. Used to be a relatively simple task based on your own production and knowing what you could get in for lines that you couldn't supply or were a smaller number that you didn't actually grow. Yeah, we say 3 months, but we'll hold them a year. We've started over the last few months to let our customers know that any quote now is only good until the 31st of December, because we just don't know what the picture's going to be. And jobs that we would sort of walk away from, I suppose, with the increase in local authorities using sort of tender portals and fairly expansive PQQ documentation before you can even start to price, I was approached quite recently for a PQQ for a supply, but the first specification or acceptance that I had to sign up for the company was that the prices I supplied in November would be good until April 2023.
Right.
We're not doing that one.
No. Yeah, strange that. Yeah, I don't imagine there's many people would want to sign up to that.
But how was that sort of text got into the body of MEPQQ? But again, I put it down to possibly a lack of appreciation for what we're bringing to the table as a living, growing product, rather than a produced item, be it a grommet or and again, no disrespect to grommet producers or brick producers, something that may not fluctuate in terms of its construction, its material costs, or any other external factors. I don't think there's a new pest and disease that's going to cause the Ibstock Brick Company to sort of lock down while it finds a spray for the bricks.
Let's hope not. Nick, quickly, please. What do you feel in terms of whether there are works that you've looked at and thought, this is not for me?
I think it's people, sending a quote into the nursery on a speculative basis. They want a price check. And John Melmo said it yesterday in one of his talks, is that you need to really scrutinize each inquiry coming in, because the process of tendering or quoting is very time consuming. And if you're only picking up, 10% of that work, if you're lucky, then the rest, 90% of what you do is waste of time. So if you can whittle it down a bit more and say, well, that's going in the bin because I don't think the project's going to happen, or in actual fact, it's not the buyer asking me for the prices, it's the QS on the job. Well, it's not my, so it's I think look at the inquiry. Is it going to happen? If it's going to happen, yes, price it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so let's address some of the questions that we've had. Julia Hilton has asked us, first of all, said, I really like Ken's suggestion on a more collaborative approach between landscape architects and plant nurseries. Then she goes on to say, Palmstead do a great job with their annual seminars, which obviously we're all aware of. But what practical steps do you see to share the expertise of nurseries with landscape architects? Well, obviously, I would say that Palmstead seminars are part of that, but where else can we add value to the relationship with landscape architects and nurseries?
Go on, Nick, sorry.
Well, one of the things I did a few times, and I would have loved to do a lot more of, was going into landscape architects' practices and giving them a lunchtime talk about how the nursery business worked and how they could collaborate better with them and get a better deal out of it. It's always about this increasing the level of understanding, and I'm sure Vince will agree with that. Yes, and also the designer that is perhaps the control freak needs to realize that they don't know everything. None of us know everything, and it's better to bring in people and be collaborative and have a team that achieves the objective. That was actually the brilliant thing about the Olympic Park. You had John Hopkins and Phil Askew bringing everyone together in, and Ken as well as one of the contractors, to that we all understood the objective, and therefore we were all able to actually hit the target.
Brilliant. Vince?
Yeah, again, seminars, the CPD is a great vehicle, as we've already testified. It's a way of getting the nursery into the landscape architect's practice. We like to do we've run bare root days where we've introduced bare root trees as a really viable option through season availability to make a big impact and manage costs. That we know there are handling issues that need to be transferred down to the landscape contractor. I'm going to go old school. I can remember healing in exercises and creating healing in areas. That's not possible on a commercial scheme, but the timing of the order, the timing of the installation is key, and that knowledge needs passing down. As a company, we are very, very open to throwing the nursery open to other sectors. We've had lighting companies that have ran forums and events on our nurseries gives us ample opportunity to promote ourselves to landscape gardeners, landscape architects. Local authority days are always very useful, but they've all been quashed at the moment. So this vehicle is something that we may have to look to more and more in the future to get out to the wider audience about what we're doing.
Ken, do you have many nursery visits, or historically, do you do many nursery visits? Do you have many nurseries come to you?
Yeah, we do. We do both nursery visits, and we do have nurseries come to us. You know, the tree tagging and nursery stock selection is quite commonplace, and in fact, it's insisted upon by many architects, particularly on the tree side. And yes, they do come to us, and we do talk through with them. Don't often get together all three, I have to say, unless it is on a nursery inspection, and that's the time when we all are together, where us as the contractor, the landscape architect, and the nursery person are all together. But apart from that, and the events like Palmstead one, which has been mentioned already, there's not many other instances where we get together.
Do we feel that there are obvious ways in which we can improve this?
Well, I think more of these kind of events, and say not get together. Look, there are FutureScape and those types of events where people do get together, but I'm sure nurseries would certainly love a little bit more foresight from architects, perhaps on the nature and type of projects that they've got coming up, and so they can kind of get discussed through earlier on. But yeah, it's, as Nick's already said, it's all education, isn't it? We've all got experience. Ours is putting it in the ground. Nick's is growing it. The architect's got the eye that I don't have, you know, to make a beautiful design come together. And it's pulling on those three resources as often as you can will create the best possible project.
Yeah, everybody putting their products and skill sets in front of one another and actually having a good discussion always helps. I've got another question. I can't get the name, unfortunately, from who it's from, but in addition to the plant availability question, how can the planting skill and long-term maintenance on the landscape side be improved? As too many landscapers seem to not actually understand more advanced planting plans, for example, including sacrificial layers and more integrated, less blobby schemes, and B, how do you actually carry out suitable long-term management, weeding, planting layers, etc., unnecessary or wrong pruning? So essentially, it's a maintenance question and an information and understanding question. Nick, you've got your hand up like a well-behaved student, so
well,
you can start.
Thank you. I would, the designers don't always put a maintenance plan in action. And if we're talking about developers who are building a project and a scheme for sale onto others, once they've sold it, they don't really give a damn, and they run with the money to the bank. And it's only certain enlightened developers, such as they have at King's Cross, where they have, you know, a resident sort of gardener, head gardener, managing the landscapes being created, and you can see the designer's management plan being followed. The caliber of training of landscapers is far too variable and not good enough, and that's something that has to be addressed longer term. And it's really communicating the needs of management. If the designer knows it, fine, but the availability of good horticulturalists for hands-on management is too slim.
Okay.
And we have to address the education problem, but that ties into the fact that, oh, it's just gardening and Johnny wasn't very good at school, and that's sort of career path. And we only get over that by saying, well, you know, I've had 40 years in horticulture, and I've thank you very much, I've enjoyed every minute. And perhaps apart from being made redundant, but apart from that, on one occasion, it's afforded me a good lifestyle, and I think, you know, all of us here have fed and clothed and protected our families through our career in horticulture. So
I think it's something that the associations can have a big role in as well, and influencing what is actually taught at colleges. Again, because it's a diverse subject, we tend to cover everything from taking some cutting, some planting, some slabbing, some pruning, and we never really focus on the key skills. Mow and blow has been mentioned today, and that is an absolute travesty. You know, a 6 foot guy starts and the hedges are quite high. If he leaves and they get a smaller van, the hedge height comes down. We always used to say in local authority, stand on the back of the truck and that'll be the height of the hedge. It's laughable, but it's not funny. It doesn't do our service, our industry any favours. But again, Ken was speaking about the bodies of our associations being active. Get landscape architects, get Ken White, get Nick Coslett, get Vince Edwards into the local colleges in the areas, selling our industry, selling our business with enthusiasm and knowledge and skill, and get the 5% of the kids that are interested, and hopefully get them trained well to become the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken, we're pretty much on time, but do you experience many, I know you don't do the maintenance yourself, but do you experience many maintenance plans being attached to planting works?
Yes, they are. I mean, we used to do it. We used to do the maintenance a lot more in the past, and we do defects. We do defects maintenance. I think that where the scheme can allow for a full-time gardener will give, or full-time horticulturist will give the greatest impact in things. The schools and colleges thing, I think we've done so many times. I think they spend half the time teaching the kids English and maths and not horticulture. So again, the maintenance is really often all down to where the scheme is, but the most successful schemes that I've seen were long-term maintenances where they have sufficient time to put in a full-time horticulturalist, and where often they're taken over by facility managers. And what they're interested is what's in the spec. It says you will be here 4 times, you will cut to this height, and sometimes that's not what needs to be done. So it's down to the end user and the end manager of the facility to work with the contractors.
A holistic approach where we're really looking at what's needed rather than what's prescribed.
Yeah.
Great,
Indeed.
thank you. Well, look, all that remains after that wonderful debate and discussion on the industry is for me to thank our audience. Thank you very much for being with us today, and to thank the tremendous and wonderful panel that we have here in Ken White, Vince Edwards, and Nick Coslett. Thanks very much, everyone, for being here, and hope to see you all at physical FutureScape in the near future.
Indeed. Well done, Lewis. Very well. Thank you.
Regards all. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.